SMT Nation, we back. Nation, I want to discuss this topic here today on T-Mobile, and they're in a bit of a precarious situation. And in my estimation, they really haven't done anything wrong with respect to spectrum auctions, but there does appear to be something kind of going on behind the scenes that's keeping them from getting access to their spectrum from Spectrum Auction 108. Again, they didn't break any rules, they didn't do anything wrong in respect to the auction, but I think what's happening here is basically a technicality, and there's not really anything other than that there. But there is a little bit of politics involved. We'll cover all of that here in today's video, and hopefully it offers some clarity into what has transpired and why T-Mobile is still waiting for the authorization and assignment of their spectrum for Spectrum Auction 108, the rest of the spectrum for their N41. All right, link for the placeholder article here, the complex story behind T-Mobile spectrum struggles. I'll provide that. That'll be in the description, and ways to support us can be found there as well. All right, so what exactly is happening here? T-Mobile's waiting. They're stuck waiting for the assignment of the spectrum that they won in this auction. They followed the rules of the auction. They were allowed in the auction, and they proceeded to take like 91% of the licenses there. The remaining licenses they didn't acquire or win were already assigned to the entities, and the only holdup is T-Mobile. And part of that is the fact that AT&T claims that there are competitive issues, that there should be an evaluation or reassessment of those types of things like competitive marketplace results, right? So basically what AT&T is saying, T-Mobile is growing too fast. They have too much spectrum. They're at an advantage compared to the rest of the industry. And that's the first thing I want to discuss is, first of all, is that even true? Well, sort of. It's sort of true. T-Mobile has been at every single auction that they've been allowed to. Like, they've been allowed to be there. They haven't violated any rules. They didn't show up when they weren't invited. They paid for all the spectrum. They haven't done anything wrong. If there was to be some type of a spectrum screen, the FCC, would have to regulate that. And they haven't regulated anything. And they were the ones themselves that approved the T-Mobile and Sprint merger, in which they acquired that huge swath of spectrum from Sprint. If something should have been regulated, that would have been the time to do it. They cleared it. They allowed it. They permitted it. There was no screen. There was no, modification to how T-Mobile could be involved in future auctions after the merger. T-Mobile, again, has done nothing wrong. So if AT&T is claiming, competition concerns, they probably should have said something sooner. They probably should have said something at the DoD auction, at the C-band auction, at the mmWave auctions. They never said anything. They never did anything. Waiting now to do it because of these licenses seems really stupid. So if you had legitimate competitive concerns, this wouldn't really be the spectrum to complain about, because T-Mobile already holds so much of it in so many places. To me, it just feels like they're trying to stand in their way and prevent their progress. Now, I don't feel bad for T-Mobile in one respect, is they're a loud, flamboyant company, especially historically, and I think they're just getting served some of their own medicine. But see, it's not so much about T-Mobile per se in my perception. I also think about the customers that could use a second home internet option or some kind of a competitive service for some really outdated, crappy cable company that's out in the middle of nowhere, where these licenses become available. That service becomes legitimate and competitive. So I think about that more so, right? I think more about the consumer. So yes, I feel like there's an AT&T element to the story. I feel like, the flamboyancy and some of those loud ways of T-Mobile in the past is kind of coming back to haunt them, right? It's kind of the get back and kind of tasting their own medicine. And we've seen bad politics ruin the industry, like with respect to the FAA and C-band. And this brings me back to the last point. If there needs to be a spectrum screen of some sort to reduce lack of competitive oversight or what have you, then they need to hurry up and change those and reframe that work and that blueprint for how they're going to do that, and then execute that. They just cannot continue to say that something needs to change, then they don't do it. I mean, Dish has complained about this as well. I don't know how serious anybody takes that, but it's worth mentioning. Verizon, for what it's worth, doesn't talk about any of this stuff, doesn't care. They seem to just build their network and not be worried about it. But what's perceived as the weakest performer when it comes to mid-band 5G and spectrum holdings and licenses for frequencies is AT&T. So to me, it feels like this is just politics, right? Lobbying and jockeying for position. And you would say AT&T, oh, they're just being competitive, right? But that's part of the problem. They weren't that active in C-band compared to Verizon. And then they tried to split the auctions with DoD and those types of things, and they didn't really do much with CBRS, right? They didn't do anything. There's a lot of things that could be said here that they could have handled business differently. But I just want to throw this out there. We've got through March to get something from the FCC, which I think happens. But if there is indeed an ongoing review process, which is what the FCC is claiming, at some point they got to realize this is it's really futile. Like I said, I feel bad for the folks looking for some kind of a better experience from the T-Mobile network in these fragmented license holding areas. And I think it goes to show you also the complexity of the T-Mobile's network. There were articles published a year or two ago about the quiet brilliance of the T-Mobile spectrum holdings. I don't know. It looks kind of messy to me, amongst other things. But that's kind of what's going on. Give you guys that update and what's happening there. We'll see if they ever change those spectrum screen rules and how that plays out and how this ends up. You guys know we'll get you an update soon. So stay tuned. Keep it locked here to the SMT for more content on these issues, topics, news, and updates. And we will look forward to your comments. Drop them down below. You are the voice of the people, the SMT Nation. Let your voice be heard.